I'm VJ Hamilton and welcome to the Autoimmune Reset, the place for you to learn how to thrive with autoimmune disease and feel empowered to take steps to transform your health to feel better than ever. You can start making changes today to improve your health. So with every episode, my mission is to share with you simple ways to up-level your diet and lifestyle with key learnings from my own journey reversing autoimmune disease and inspirational stories from those who have reset their autoimmune symptoms and are now thriving in life. I suffered from autoimmune disease for over 25 years and now I live symptom-free, and I wish the same for you as well. So thank you for being here and sharing this time with me. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Autoimmune Reset podcast. I'm your host, VJ Hamilton. I'm a nutritionist, scientist and expert in autoimmune disease. And today's episode is a really important one, and it's something I've been wanting to talk about for a while because it completely changes how we understand endometriosis. March is Endometriosis Awareness Month, and I think just more and more of us need to understand this condition better because I feel that there are so many people being affected by it that haven't been diagnosed yet, and that's what I'm seeing in clinic as well. And what I often see is both in clinic and the conversations that I see online is that endometriosis gets reduced down to one thing. It's either described as a hormonal issue or it's framed purely as a pain condition. And whilst those things are part of the picture, they're not the full story, because when you start to look deeper, and especially when you look at the research that is now emerging, you realize that endometriosis is actually a condition involving multiple systems in the body, and those systems are constantly talking to each other. So today I want to walk you through something called the neuroendocrine immune axis. Now, I know that sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but I promise I'm going to break it down in a way that actually makes sense, because once you understand this, a lot of things start to click. Why symptoms don't always match what doctors see, why you can feel inflamed, exhausted and sensitive even when your tests look normal. And that's a comment that I see time and time again in my free group, the Autoimmune Forum. People are just looking for answers and they need validation of how they are feeling as well, and why a more integrative approach is often needed when it comes to endometriosis. So before we go into anything complex, let's simplify this, because the neuroendocrine immune axis is just a way of describing how three key systems in your body communicate, and that's your nervous system, your hormones, and your immune system, all things I've talked about in depth in this podcast. And that's it. And the easiest way to think about it is it's like a three-way conversation happening in your body all the time. Your nervous system is constantly asking, am I safe? Am I under threat? And your hormones are responding to that on a daily basis. They're adjusting things like estrogen, progesterone, cortisol. And your immune system is listening to both of those signals and deciding, do I need to create inflammation? Do I need to calm things down? So these systems are not separate. They are deeply entwined. And when one becomes dysregulated, it affects the other. Now let's bring this into the context of endometriosis. And traditionally, endometriosis has been explained as an endometrial-like tissue growing outside of the uterus. And that's how it presents, and that's why it is explained in that way. And that is certainly what is happening. But that explanation doesn't tell us why the body allows that tissue to grow. And I don't think we have the full answer on that either. It doesn't tell us why the immune system doesn't clear it effectively. Normally, if the immune system sees something that isn't right, it creates that inflammatory response against it. And it doesn't explain why our symptoms can vary so much between people. Some people with endometriosis will be in severe pain. There's other people who might be living with endometriosis and have no idea that they have it. I have heard stories of people who have then been assessed and they have lots of endometrial tissue growing and they just didn't have a clue about it until, a specific symptom came up and that got investigated. If it was just about the tissue, the picture would actually be much more simpler. But what we actually see is that the immune system is not responding as it should. Inflammation, and that it's more that chronic systemic inflammation, is often elevated. Hormone signaling becomes altered, and the nervous system is often in a more sensitized state, so that hypervigilant state that we see with autoimmune conditions as well. So rather than one isolated issue, we're looking at a system that has become dysregulated. And that's why there is a lot of similarities between endometriosis and autoimmune disease. It's debatable whether endometriosis is an autoimmune disease because of those similarities. Now let's focus on the nervous system, because this is where I think one of the biggest misunderstandings lies. And the nervous system is often talked about in relation to pain, but its role goes far beyond that. And your nervous system is constantly regulating things like your digestion. It regulates inflammation, your hormone signaling, and not just your stress hormones, your other hormones as well. It regulates things like your blood flow, your immune activity. So when your nervous system is out of balance, everything else can be affected. And that's what I have learned through being a clinician and working with clients. I can see how much nervous system dysregulation is contributing to their system. And I was trained about the nervous system. I studied a lot about the nervous system when I was becoming a nutritionist. But the truth is, I don't think there was enough focus on it, because it probably is the one thing that I am seeing in all my clients. And, I might be seeing gut issues in, say, 80% of my clients, but nervous system dysregulation is often an issue with most of the clients that I'm working with. And one of the key players here is something called the vagus nerve. And it's something that I have become extremely fascinated in. I've been doing a lot of research around it. What it does is really important, and the vagus nerve helps your body shift into what we call a rest and repair state. And this is the state where inflammation is often reduced, your digestion will improve, your hormones regulate more effectively, and the body can actually heal. If you had a supplement that could do all of that, then we would all be taking it. But you have something inside you that can do that for you. But in many women with endometriosis, that system is not working optimally. Instead, the body is often sitting in that more activated state. And what that can feel like is being easily overwhelmed, having heightened pain sensitivity, having digestive issues, having poor sleep. You might not be able to get to sleep, or waking up in the middle of the night, or feeling like your body is just constantly on edge. You might jump at things that for somebody else just wouldn't be an issue. You're just in that more hypervigilant state. So again, this is not just about pain. It's actually about how the body is regulating itself overall. Now let's connect this more directly to inflammation, because this is one of the central drivers in endometriosis, and probably why there has been a lot of interest in endometriosis as an autoimmune disease and exploring that aspect of it. And as we know, the body doesn't just create inflammation randomly. It has tightly regulated systems that control both the initiation and the resolution of inflammation. And that is so important, especially when you have an autoimmune condition, because the initiation of inflammation is quite a normal process. If you become ill or if you get injured, then you need that initiation of inflammation. What is often the problem is the resolution of inflammation, when you can't switch off that inflammatory process for whatever reason. And one of the key regulators of this process is the nervous system, particularly through something called the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathways. And this pathway is mediated largely via the vagus nerve. And when the vagus nerve is functioning well, so when your vagal tone is optimal, the vagus nerve is between the gut and the brain, it sends signals that actively suppress excessive inflammatory activity, which is what we're looking for when it comes to these inflammatory conditions. And more specifically, they've found that it can inhibit the release of these pro-inflammatory cytokines such as TNF-alpha, interleukin-1 beta, and you may have heard of those cytokines because there are medications that are designed to suppress those cytokines. But again, your body has an amazing ability to do that when it is working optimally. In a well-regulated system, there is a clear beginning, middle, and resolution. However, when the nervous system is dysregulated, which we often see in chronic stress and persistent immune activation, this regulatory mechanism becomes less efficient. vagal tone is reduced, and that anti-inflammatory signaling is diminished. And that's why people who are experiencing an inflammatory condition or autoimmune disease continue to have those chronic symptoms, because that inflammatory process has not been switched off. This is a really important distinction, because unresolved inflammation is what drives chronicity. It keeps the system in that low-grade, persistent inflammatory state. And in the context of endometriosis, and to be honest, in autoimmune disease, this can contribute to that sustained pelvic inflammation. It can increase peripheral and central sensitivity. So pain is amplified. You're going to feel things more than the next person. It can also delay tissue repair and a more reactive, less regulated immune response overall. In the world we're living in, it's not good. We need a healthy, robust immune system. Now let's bring in the immune system, because this is a really important piece when we ask the question, why does the tissue grow in the first place? I know this is something I always questioned around endometriosis. So one of the most widely accepted theories is something called retrograde menstruation. And this is where menstrual blood containing endometrial cells flows back through the fallopian tubes and into the pelvic cavity. And interestingly, this happens in most women to some degree. So the presence of these cells alone doesn't explain endometriosis, because in a healthy system, the immune system would recognize those cells as being in the wrong place and clear them efficiently. It would essentially tidy up the environment, which it is trained to do, and that's what it does to support you. But in endometriosis, that clearance process doesn't happen effectively. And there are a few key reasons for this. Firstly, we can see an altered immune surveillance. So cells that are responsible for identifying and removing abnormal tissue, which is an extremely important role in your immune system. And that is particularly these cells called these natural killer cells. They appear to be less active or less effective. So the body is not recognizing and responding to these misplaced cells in the way it should. Secondly, we see changes in macrophage behavior. Now, macrophages are immune cells that help to clear debris and coordinate inflammation. In endometriosis, they tend to become inflammatory rather than resolving. And that's the word we want to be looking for here, resolving. So instead of clearing the tissue, they actually start to release those cytokines that we want to suppress and growth factors that support its survival and even its growth. And thirdly, the environment itself becomes more permissive, and there is increased local inflammation, higher levels of estrogen, and changes in signaling pathways, and promote angiogenesis, which is actually the formation of new blood vessels. So the tissue is not only surviving, it's now being supported by your body, and over time it can implant, grow, and become more established. What we're really looking at here is not just the presence of those misplaced cells that we know is common for a lot of women, but it's the failure of clearance combined with an environment that allows those cells to thrive. And importantly, the immune dysfunction does not sit in isolation. It's influenced by hormones, particularly estrogen, which can amplify inflammatory signaling. And it's also influenced by the nervous system. And this is what I mentioned at the beginning, because chronic stress and reduced vagal tone can impair immune regulation and shift the body towards a more inflammatory state. So again, we come back to that idea that everything is connected. The immune system is not acting independently. It's responding to the signals it is receiving from the rest of the body. Now, I want to touch on something that often gets overlooked, which is the gut. And when I say overlooked, I mean overlooked when it comes to endometriosis. Your gut plays a really important role in both immune function and hormone balance. And there's a group of bacteria in the gut, often referred to as the estrabolone. And that helps to regulate how estrogen is processed and cleared from the body. And under normal circumstances, estrogen is metabolized in the liver, it's packaged up and sent into the gut so it can be excreted. But here's where things start to shift. Certain gut bacteria produce an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. And what this enzyme does is essentially unpack the estrogen in the gut, and it allows it to be reabsorbed back into circulation rather than being eliminated as it should be. Now, in small amounts, this is part of normal physiology, but when beta-glucuronidase activity is elevated, which we often see in dysbiosis, low microbial diversity or high microbial diversity, or in an inflammatory gut environment, it can lead to increased recirculation of estrogen. And over time, this can contribute to a relative state of estrogen dominance or estrogen excess or even estrogen imbalance in relation to progesterone. And that's why it's not just about having a lot of estrogen. It's about not having the balance of progesterone with that estrogen. And this is partly relevant in endometriosis because estrogen promotes that growth and activity of endometrial tissue. Now, this is something we can actually measure clinically, and on tests like the GI effect stool test, which I run with many clients, we're able to assess beta-glucuronidase activity alongside the broader microbiome picture, and it can give us a really useful insight into whether estrogen is likely being cleared effectively or recirculated. And I worked with a client who came to me with alopecia, and as we were going through her health history, she mentioned that she had been diagnosed with endometriosis and she was having really heavy, painful periods. And this is something that we actually worked at first before working on the alopecia. And that's what I find a lot when I'm working with clients with hair loss. We work on these underlying imbalances first, and then their hair starts to grow. Once we address these underlying imbalances, so I often find that working with clients with hair loss, I'm not just helping them with the hair loss, I'm helping them with so many other factors because your body has to be in that optimal state for the hair to then grow. And it was great because it completely changed her life. She wasn't able to go out during her menstrual cycle. She was living alone. She didn't have a partner at the time. She didn't really like to socialize. She was quite senior in her work, but she was working a lot from home, and it was completely affecting her life. And it just shows that when we were able to work on her gut health and work on harmonizing the gut microbiome, so she wasn't producing as much beta-glucuronidase, we could see when we did the Dutch Plus that she wasn't detoxing estrogen effectively. When we worked on those underlying issues, she noticed a huge difference when it came to her endometriosis symptoms. And also, as we continued working together, she then started seeing regrowth as well. And when it comes to your gut, the nervous system plays a role here too, because the nervous system influences motility, how food moves through the gut, enzyme secretion, which is so important for breaking down proteins and carbohydrates, and the balance of the microbiome itself. So if the nervous system is dysregulated, we often see knock-on effects in the gut, and that can feed back into hormones and immune balance as well. So once again, we're looking at a system, not a single pathway. So when I'm working with somebody with endometriosis, I'm not just looking at hormones, I'm looking at the whole picture. And some of the patterns I commonly see are a history of chronic stress or burnout, digestive issues like bloating, IBS, which they may have been diagnosed with IBS, I know that's an umbrella term, constipation, urgency to go to the toilet, sensitivity to certain foods and supplements, fatigue that doesn't fully resolve when they've had plenty of sleep, and that heightened pain response. I feel like that is one of the symptoms I see the most, that some people are just living in a constant state of pain. And when you're living that way, that's all you can think about. Even you want to enjoy yourself, you want to do all the nice things that life has to offer, seeing your friends, seeing your family, but when you're in pain, it takes over everything. And I've had that when I've had migraines, I've had that when I've had joint issues, I've had that when I've had stomach pain. You can't really think about anything else, even if you're having the most amazing time in the most amazing place. Once that pain hits, that really just takes over everything. And that's why it's so important that this gets addressed. Let's bring this into something practical, because understanding this is helpful, but what can you actually do? And the first place I often start is with the nervous system. It wasn't always, but it is something that I am speaking to my clients about every time I see them now. And I just want to be clear here, this is not about just relaxing. This is about actively supporting your body's ability to regulate. And some simple things you can do is slowing down your breathing. Having a breathing practice can make a huge difference, even if you're only doing it a couple of minutes throughout the day. And there's plenty of apps now that can help you with those breathing techniques. Getting natural light in the morning. One of the things that I set for myself this year is that I would start not only taking my dogs out at lunchtime, but taking them out first thing in the morning so I can get some morning sunlight. And I have been doing that, and I've been feeling so much better for it. Getting some gentle movement like walking. And I know there isn't much science between the 10,000 steps, but actually if you can use something to monitor how many steps you're doing a day that will motivate you to walk more, I think that is a good thing. You can also do humming. and singing. I love to sing. I'm not singing as much at the moment. I used to be part of a choir, but it's such a great thing to do, and it's lovely to do with other people as well. I do actually miss it, but at the minute I've got other priorities. But humming as well, you can just be humming while you're doing things throughout your day. And even small moments of stillness during your day can make a big difference. You could be having an Epsom salt bath and just almost staring at the wall, going outside and just sitting outside, having just some time where you're just sat comfortably and really not doing anything, not having your phone, not watching the TV. How often are we doing these things? They can be quite simple to weave into the day if we're prioritizing them. It only needs to be 5, 10, 15 minutes. And I know the demands of life, it's not easy, but have a think about your schedule. Is there some, just a little part of your day that you could devote to this? We also have some tools that can support this more directly. And I use my NeuroSim device. I sometimes use it when I'm relaxing, or I can be using it when I'm working as well. And that can stimulate the vagus nerve. Obviously not when I'm speaking to clients, but when I am focusing and researching for a client, writing a client plan, writing an article, it does help me shift into that very focused state, which I like, and it can help to shift your body into that rest and repair state that we spoke about earlier. And for some people, having something tangible like that can make it much easier to actually access that state, and that's certainly the case for me, especially if the nervous system has been dysregulated for a long time. And I would say my nervous system was dysregulated for about 35 years. I have been working on it since then. It's probably going to be something that I'm working on for the rest of my life to keep in that calm, regulated state as much as I possibly can do. Because I'm just more inclined to doing more and being in a higher state of stress, because that's just what is normal to me. There are also more accessible tools that can support this as well. There's apps like the Nerva app, if you've not tried that, which focuses on gut-directed hypnotherapy. They do a nice course that you can do. And even something as simple as using an app like Insight Timer, which helps with meditation, but there are some breathing exercises on there as well. And whilst these might seem quite simple, they are working on the same underlying pathways. They're helping to create signals of safety in the body. And over time, these signals can start to shift how the nervous system, immune system, and even hormone signaling behaves. So again, it's not about doing one perfect thing. It's about consistently giving your body the inputs it needs to move back into balance. And clinically, I've seen this support things like better sleep. It can help reduce stress to feel calmer, improve how you are feeling on a daily basis and your recovery when you're doing things like exercise, or if you've been working hard on a project, just not feeling as drained from that. And in some cases, it can help with reducing inflammatory symptoms as well. And then alongside that, I'll look at supporting the gut, reducing inflammation depending on what is causing the inflammation, hormones balance as well. And that may be through clearance and detoxification, depending on what comes up for my clients. But the key is that we're not just chasing one pathway. We're not just chasing one system, we're supporting the system as a whole. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from today, it's this: endometriosis is not just a hormone problem, and it's not just a pain condition, it's a system-based condition, which means that the goal is not to just chase one thing, but to gently start supporting the system as a whole. And I always think it's important to leave you with something you can actually do from today. So if you're thinking, where do I even start? Then just keep it simple. One of the most powerful places to begin is with inflammation and nervous system regulation. And that might look like something as straightforward as taking 5 minutes in the morning to slow your breathing, getting outside in the natural light, as I said, or creating a small pause in your day when your body can shift out of that constant on state. Those signals of safety really do matter. From a nutritional and supplement perspective, one area that can be helpful, particularly in endometriosis, is supporting the body's ability to resolve inflammation, not just suppress it. And this is where these specialized pro-resolving mediators, or SPMs, come in. This is quite a new supplement, and they're derived from omega-3 fatty acids and play a role in actively switching off inflammation and supporting tissue repair. This happens naturally in the body, but you can now supplement with them. And I really like a product like Resolvin by Body Bio, which is one example of this. And clinically, this can be supportive for helping to calm the inflammatory signaling and support that resolution phase that we spoke about earlier. But as always, it's important to work with your practitioner to make sure anything you're taking is appropriate for you and your individual picture. But I will put the link to that in the show notes if you want to find out more, because there is no one size fits all approach here. So think of this less as needing to do everything and more about choosing one or two areas where you can start to support your body differently and then building from there. Because when you start to change the inputs, you start to change the signals your body is receiving. And that is where real shifts begin. And when we start to understand how the nervous system, immune system, and hormones interact, we can start to approach it much more effectively in a more compassionate way. Because your body is not broken, it is responding to the signals it's receiving. And when we change those signals, we start to change the outcome. So thanks so much for listening. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can contact me over on my Instagram account, which is at the Autoimmunity Nutritionist. And if you'd like me to go deeper into any part of this, whether that's the gut, hormones, or nervous system support, just let me know. You can also join my free Facebook group, the Autoimmune Forum. I'm going to be sharing a spring reset with you in April. I think we all need that this time of year. So there's going to be daily prompts all around resetting yourself for spring. So I'd love to see you over there. Again, the link to that will be in the show notes. If not, I'll see you in the next episode. Fantastic rest of your week, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Thank you very much for joining me today on the Autoimmune Reset. I really hope you enjoyed the discussion, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And if you liked it, I would hugely appreciate a review on iTunes, as it helps me understand what you like about the podcast and to help share the information with more people. I'm excited to speak to you next time, and remember, you have the power to take the reins on your health. So keep the faith and celebrate the small wins. Until next time.